I haven't in the past acknowledged that we are living on the land of the Sonoro, the Chemehuevi, and the Mojave peoples who lived here before European settlers. I wanted to acknowledge them as ancestors of this land. And we were in our Q&A sharing a response to Lupita's question about teachers. And so I wanted to formally acknowledge and give thanks to Ruth, my teacher, and our teacher for some of us, and her teacher Ubakin, and his teacher Ledi Sayadaw. And then I wanted to personally give you, each one of you, thanks for being here in this room, in the Zendo at Dhamma Dena, and for those of you who are here online, because this community would have been different if any one of you weren't here. And that it seems, at least to me, a little historic to have a 3-week retreat for our community. I don't think that's happened anywhere in the world, actually. And some of you came in for the last week, and some of you have been here for 2 weeks, and some of you have been here for even longer than that. And I've been here at Dhamma Dena, and so I wanted to honor you for being part of this historic occasion. And also it's somewhat historic to be teaching with Venerable Fred, who is such a radical monk that he's willing to teach with a lay person, a lay woman no less. So there's so many sort of quite amazing things to appreciate as we're coming to the end of this long retreat. And of course, then also to lift up your amazing practice. Thank you so much for your amazing practice, for your questions, and for naming your challenges, for being willing to listen to Venerable Fred and myself. For those of you online who are part of the 2-week retreat, as well as this last retreat, thank you. When I started my Dharma talk about ignorance with the prayer that I say before breakfast, and sharing that there's no end, there's no place to end. I think that's also true for the gratitude practice, that there's no place that you can end, because once we move into orienting towards a gratitude practice, then it really is never ending. Because we can just keep going on naming the conditions that have given rise to this. And so before I go on, I want to read. This is not very organized, so just to say, maybe I didn't bring it. So, because I had all these papers, and there was one story I wanted to share. So, here it is. This was from oral history and study of sexuality in the lesbian community from like in the 80s. And this is a paragraph from this book by Madeline Davis and Elizabeth Leposky Kennedy. And they're quoting lesbian from the McCarthy era. And this is what she said. Things back then were horrible. And I think that because I fought like a man to survive, I made it somehow easier for the kids coming out today. I did all their fighting for them. I'm not a rich person. I don't even have a lot of money. I don't even have a little money. I would have nothing to leave anybody in this world. But I have that. That I can leave to the kids who are coming out now, who will come out into the future, that I left them a better place to come out into. And that's all I have to offer to leave them. But I wouldn't deny it, even though I was getting my brains beaten up. I would never stand up and say, no, don't hit me, I'm not gay. I'm not gay. I wouldn't do that. And so I want to give thanks to all our ancestors who came out before us, who had their brains beaten out in order for us to come out in a better world. A better as in, over the years, easier. And I know we're still in that struggle, but it is so much easier than it was in the 80s and before, or in the McCarthy era. So I give thanks to all our ancestors in this community for their struggles. And then I give thanks as an elder lesbian to our trans non-binary communities for the way they've picked up that mantle and taken us further into the challenge around gender, and also the activism that they are leading in so many other areas, like how many trans people there are in Black Lives Matter, in the leadership in Black Lives Matter. So I wanted to give thanks too for you all. So maybe you can guess I'm talking about gratitude tonight. It seems sort of like a fitting talk to end a 3-week retreat. Although, of course, we're not at the end. So, gratitude is actually a verb. It isn't just an emotion, but it's a way of living. And it begins with our intention, that wish to open our hearts in appreciation. And it then creates the conditions for further opening. And I'm reminded of a beaded feather I made when I was studying with Evelyn Eaton. For those of you who knew, I can't remember if I mentioned that. In this last retreat that I studied with a medicine prayer pipe carrier. And so part of the training was learning how to bead, which I don't know if any of you have tried, extraordinarily exacting, working with these tiny little beads, and I managed to bead one feather, and I gave it to my father for his birthday. And after he died, I flew to South Africa, and because my parents had gone back to South Africa, and was helping my mom empty out his study. And there in the drawer was this beaded feather, half unraveled, with little beads all over the drawer. And I felt so touched by that, because when I was younger and I had made paintings as young kids do with great excitement, and I'd give them to my parents. And somehow, I don't know why I would, because they were really snobs about art, I expected them to like frame them or at least put them on the fridge, but instead they put them all down they put all those paintings down in the cellar where the old coal was stored during cold times. But what I got from my father keeping it is that he had opened up to keep something imperfect that I had made that unraveled probably so quickly after I gave it to him. And in that keeping, he was expressing his gratitude, his appreciation of that gift. And just something as really, in a way, as simple as that can be a heart opening. So this quality of seeing our blessings is close to transforming our experience into the sacred and into a blessing itself. And the definition of blessing in the encyclopedia is to kneel down in front of and pay homage, to say good things or words. And in reading that, it just highlights how we pay homage and appreciation so much in this room. You know, you see Venerable Fred and myself bowing down in front of the altar, paying homage or offering appreciation over and over again, as you all do, bringing your hands together and saying thank you. And I know there's a way in which we take it for granted sometimes, because sometimes it can be, not that we don't feel something when we put our hands together, but taking a moment to really acknowledge what it means to live in an environment where so often we're doing that, where we're saying thank you to each other. It's kind of radical, isn't it? Like to reflect on how many times we're saying thank you to each other. And maybe we also now could take a moment to reflect on what it means to receive those thank yous. I know that we're thanking each other as a community when we do this, but it's also about us too being thanked. And what an amazing culture that we're creating. So we are already in a deep practice of gratitude and thanks. And so then we are developing this mental attitude and habit of mind of gratitude. And so then I wanted to read this an excerpt from an experiment that I just happened to pick up. Yeah. So this is from an experiment by Eamon Emmons and McCulloch, who asked hundreds of individuals to either record things they were grateful for, or record hassles from their daily life, or simply record any event or circumstance that affected them. So they did the series of studies with hundreds of participants, and they found that those who'd been randomly assigned to the gratitude practice reported more happiness and joy, experienced fewer symptoms of physical illness, spent more time exercising, were more optimistic and satisfied with their lives, reported increased positive effect and decreased negative effect, were more likely to offer emotional support to others, felt an increased sense of connection with others, and even slept more hours with a better quality of sleep, for those of you who are insomniacs. And then they go on to quote another study. That's like almost magical, isn't it? So, but it does speak to the power of really taking it up as a practice. And I don't think I would ever have thought about considering and contemplating gratitude as a practice except for the time when I did a 3-month retreat at home. I was married at the time, and my partner went to IMS, Insight Meditation Society, for 3 months, and I stayed at home. And I didn't see anyone. The students would leave food on the doorstep, and I was alone for 3 months in my house. And after, I can't remember, maybe a month, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I mean, I knew what I was doing, but sometimes it just was like a lot. And so it just came to me to start doing a gratitude practice for half an hour every evening. And at first I was like, thank you for the Dharma, thank you for my teacher, and then, thank you for Shah, and my wife at the time, and some other things that I can't remember right now. And then I'd look at my watch, and it was like 4 minutes. And I'd said, no, 30 minutes. And I'm like, whoa, really 30 minutes? So it would be a stretch. And but it was amazing, because then in desperation, I was like, well, what else can I thank? And so I thanked every single part of my body. And that was another 5 minutes. And then I went around and I thanked everything in the living room, because I had put my altar in the living room. And so there was this armchair that I sat, that I meditated in. I went between a cushion and the armchair, and I thanked my armchair. And it was amazing, because every day I thanked my armchair, and I had some of my own paintings on the wall, and I thanked my paintings, and I've never ever thanked the art that I've done, that I hung up on the wall in rebellion, like I'm putting my art up on the wall. And I thanked them, and I thanked that I could do that. Not that they were that fantastic, but it gave me pleasure to see them, and I thanked that I could put color and paint on a paper and enjoy it. And I thanked over and over again my armchair, and then I got to thinking about the early books that I read about feminism, and what an incredible difference they made to me. Like just that languaging around women's oppression in the late 60s, when before that wasn't ever in any book that I had read, and that languaging of what our reality was, particularly Sheila Rowbotham. I loved her book, Woman's Consciousness, Man's World. And it just continued, that practice of gratitude for, being able to live in a house that was right by a creek, and then right by the creek there was a watershed area that was undeveloped, and it became unlimited. After a while, it wasn't hard to fill up my half an hour. I had a little rattle, and I would rattle along while I was saying it, and then eventually I would sing my thanks, and then I could do it for a lot longer when I was singing my thanks. So it became this very deep practice that then I never stopped doing. And in the morning, every morning when I go out to outside to the labyrinth, and I offer metta of safety and well-being in all the directions. I give thanks. And for someone who is extremely aversive, I wake up and I am just grumpy. I can count on one hand when I wake up, and there isn't some sense of some like, oh my God, I'm so grumpy. And I go out and I do my greetings and offer metta in the 4 directions, and I give my thanks, and it is amazing. You know, it's like those ads. If you just drink this cup of coffee, then you'll feel great for the rest of the day. But that's how it is. That practice of gratitude, it just changes. It just is deeply transformative, actually. So then I wanted, just for fun, to read the story, and it's about elephants. I love elephants. Maybe you do too. I can't remember where I got the story from, but I think it came from the internet, actually. It had all started several weeks earlier with a phone call from an elephant welfare organization. Would Anthony be interested in adopting a problem herd of wild elephants? They lived on a game reserve 600 miles away and were troublesome, recalled Anthony. They had a tendency to break out of reserves, and the owners wanted to get rid of them fast. If we didn't take them, they would be shot. The matriarch, the woman explained on the phone, is an amazing escape artist and has worked out how to break through electric fences. She just twists the wire around her tusks until it snaps, or takes the pain and smashes through. Well, why ask me? I asked. She said, I've heard you've had a way with animals. You're right for them, or maybe they're right for you. When they arrived, they were thumping the inside of the trailer like a gigantic drum. We sedated them with a pole-sized syringe, and once they'd calmed down, the door slid open and the matriarch emerged, followed by her baby bull, 3 females, and an 11-year-old bull. Last off was the 15-year-old son of the dead mother. He stared at us, writes Anthony, flared his ears, and with a trumpet of rage charged, pulling up just short of the fence in front of us. His mother and baby sister had been shot before his eyes, and here he was, just a teenager defending the herd. David, my head ranger, named him Munzani, which in Zulu means sir. We christened the matriarch Nana and the second female in command, the most feisty, Frankie, after my wife. We had erected a giant enclosure within the reserve to keep them safe until they became calm enough to move out into the reserve proper. Nana gathered her clan, loped up to the fence, and stretched out her trunk, touching the electric wires. The 8,000-volt charge sent a jolt shuddering through her bulk. She backed off. Then, with her family in tow, she strode the entire perimeter of the enclosure, pointing her trunk at the wire to check for vibrations from the electrical current. As I went to bed that night, I noticed the elephants lining up along the fence, facing out towards their former home. It looked ominous. I was woken several hours later by one of the reserve rangers shouting, "The elephants have gone, they've broken out." Two adult elephants had worked as a team to fell a tree, smashing it into the electrical fence. Isn't that amazing? And then charging out of the enclosure. I scrambled together a search party and we raced to the border of the game reserve, but we were too late. The fence was down and the animals had broken out. They had somehow found the generator that powered the electric fence around the reserve, and after trampling it like a tin can, they had pulled the concrete embedded fence posts out of the ground like matchsticks and headed north. The reserve staff chased them but had competition. We met a group of locals carrying large caliber rifles who claimed the elephants were fair game now. On our radios, we heard the wildlife authorities were issuing elephant rifles to staff. Now it was a race against time. Anthony managed to get the herd back onto Thulu property, but problems had begun. Their bid for freedom, if anything, increased their resentment at being kept in captivity. Nana watched my every move, hostility seeping from every pore, her family behind her. There was no doubt that sooner or later they were going to make another break for freedom. Then, in a flash, came the answer to me. I would live with the herd. To save their lives, I would stay with them, feed them, talk to them, but most importantly, be with them day and night. We had to get to know each other. After a few days, I woke up in front of Nana. It was clear she was planning to escape. I pleaded with her in desperation. Both our lives now depended on it. The only thing separating us was an 8,000-volt fence, and she was preparing to flatten it and make her escape. Her body tensed, her ears flared, and I turned towards her. I said, "Don't do it, Nana." She stood there motionless. The rest of the herd froze. "This is your home now," I continued. "Please don't go for it, girl." I felt her eyes boring into me. They'll kill you all if you break out. This is your home. There is no need to go." Suddenly, the absurdity of the situation struck me. Here I was in pitch darkness, talking to this wild female elephant with a baby, the most dangerous possible combination, as if we were having a friendly chat. But I meant every word of it. "You will all die if you go. Stay here. This is a good place." She took another step forward. I could see her tense up again, preparing to snap the electric wire and be out. I was in their path and would only have seconds to scramble out of their way and climb the nearest tree, and I didn't know if I'd be fast enough to avoid being trampled. Then something happened between Nana and me, some tiny spark of recognition, flaring for the briefest of moments. Then it was gone. Nana turned and melted into the bush, and the rest of the herd followed. After a few years, Anthony died. And from miles and miles away, two herds of elephants, sensing they had lost a beloved human friend, moved in a solemn, almost funeral procession to make a call on the bereaved family at Anthony's home. They had not visited the house for a year and a half, and it must have taken them about 12 hours to make the journey. The first herd arrived on Sunday, and the second a day later, and they hung around for 2 days, communing before they made their way back into the bush. So a beautiful story about gratitude from elephants to Anthony. So, contemplating gratitude, one of the most traditional ways to contemplate gratitude is to contemplate our death, to know that at one point or another we're going to die, and to turn towards this amazing opportunity that we have to live and to awaken. And what an incredible gift it is. And I know that probably many of you have heard the story about a turtle living in the ocean, and that every 100 years it pops its head out to breathe the air, and that floating on this ocean is a ring with a hole in it. And you can guess how infrequent would be the possibility of the turtle sticking its head up inside the ring. And the Buddha says that is how infrequent it is to be born a human being. That it's a rare, out of all sentient beings, an incredible and rare blessing to come into the world as a human being. And then the practice of gratitude is a practice that really asks us to be mindful, because in order to feel gratitude, there has to be a connection to what we're grateful for, and that connection means we need to be present. And even though I had sat on that living room chair in my living room for so many years before that 3-month retreat, I hadn't noticed how the seams were that there was a cover on it, and how the seams had been sewn so carefully along the armrest, and the way it had been constructed. And that thanks meant that I was actually noticing the life of the chair. And it comes too close to what Venerable Fred was saying about, how we project a name, a label onto something, and then in that, not projecting, how perception names something like, oh tree, oh flower, and in that naming, then we glance off or move our attention away, because now we know, oh, that's a tree. Unless there's a particular interest. Oh, I wonder what kind of tree this is and how are the leaves. It's just like, oh, tree, oh, car, oh, something like that. But gratitude actually is that movement to appreciate, knows the particular characteristics and qualities of what we're moved to appreciate. And so we're coming to know the experience more accurately just as it is. So it's a practice that actually brings us into right relationship with whatever that we're being grateful for. And challenges the distortions of how we've named something, as though because something is just a thing, it doesn't deserve to be honored. Like, I don't know if any of you read the poem that the Chilean poet, beginning with N, Neruda, wrote about a suit. Like, he wrote this exquisite poem about his suit, and it just reminded me so much of how sometimes, but I know you don't do this, we put on clothes and we don't really like take a moment to acknowledge the labor that went into it, how it fits us, maybe all the times we've worn it, how it's become worn, how, a moth bit, ate something and then I didn't darn it. I thought I darned it, but I didn't. Many of my sweaters have darned, and that it begins to become alive. And that really challenges the relationship of not seeing life where life is, right? And it's so much about the distorted perception of how we can clear cut a forest, for example, because it's not seen as life, it's seen as a product. And so the practice of gratitude enlivens our relationship with the world. And then we also have the opportunity here to appreciate the practice of harmlessness, that we are not harming, that we're at least not intentionally harming each other, that we are contributing to a safe environment, and that each of us are committed to creating a field as much as we can of safety. And what a powerful gratitude practice, what a powerful practice that is, and how much gratitude we can have for being part of that movement of Dharma practitioners and social justice activists who are committed to practicing harmlessness. And so, I've mentioned that story so much about Evelyn saying, what are you grateful for? And I said to her, I don't know if I'm grateful for anything. I was young. And she took me to my old van and we spent a half an hour going through, yes, it has the wheels, and so I'm grateful for the wheels of the van and so on. But this is such a powerful ground for gratitude. The many, many actions and considerations we take in our lives to refrain from harming. If we took that as a practice, we would feel so differently about ourselves and so grateful for those beautiful energies living inside of us, even when we do it with, oh my God, another plastic bag to wash. I don't like washing things, my dishes anyway. It doesn't particularly give me any joy. But then to wash plastic bags on top of it, it's like, oh no. But I do, because I don't want to have to but take more new ones from the store. Just simple things like that I'm like, oh yeah, I am in my very small ways, as you are, in all the things and the way you live your life, creating harmlessness. Moments free of harm, and many, many moments free of harm. So contemplating the gift of virtue, of our virtue, which is also a contemplation for the cultivation of joy, and it's a contemplation for gratitude. And I know when we're feeling depressed or overwhelmed by what's going on in the world, it's hard to forget this. But I really want to lift this up as a really important practice, because when we're in touch with our caring and this incredible contribution that we are making of a world that is free of harm, that is so deep, and it's a way to love ourselves and honor and respect ourselves. So the other placards standing up, not only for love, for gratitude and the gift of harmlessness. And then I also wanted to lift up as a gratitude practice our work with speech, and we read the mindfulness, the agreements, the multicultural agreements that we've had in our group sharing. And even if we're like bumbling learners a lot in our speech, we can acknowledge that sometimes. And it's not like we are saying, I read this, to the statement, increasing coal mining and armament production will make America great again. just the amount of speech that is a distortion of reality, and how much there is at least the intention inside of us to speak in ways that create well-being, that are part of our learning and growing and naming of what's healing and what's truthful and what's liberating. And we do that by listening to Dharma talks and inquiring in our group inquiry. How do we understand this? What is this? Oh, here's my experience of this. This is how I work with anger or insomnia or whatever it is. Like, do you feel grateful for your speech, for your sharing in community circles, for the ways you talk to your honeys in loving ways? Because often we go to where we mess up, but how often do we reflect and have gratitude for our speech and the times when we are caring and loving? It's so beautiful. So the places where we can practice gratitude, and like when we feel tired tonight, because I thought about this Dharma talk, when we feel tired tonight and it's like, oh, I can't find my breath, practice gratitude. Like, think about all the things that you are grateful for about yourself and about your blessings, the clothes you're wearing, the armchairs in your home or whatever they are. So, let's see. Okay. So what are some of the difficulties around this? So one is, well, really, who am I to receive, all these blessings? Like, we feel like there's this, you should be grateful for the food on your plate because there are people starving in Africa. It's just like a kind of distorted misunderstanding of generosity. Each of us deserves it and has a place and a home on this earth. And in that come innumerable blessings. Another obstruction to gratitude is that we're so stuck on strategizing and fixing things in our life that we forget to turn in gratitude. And then another is taking things for granted, like I lived in London for 11 years, 12 years, something like that, and I used public transportation all the time, which meant standing at the bus stop, and it was standing at the bus stop in, like in horrible weather, and I now, in retrospect, I had this sense of, well, where is the bus? The bus should be on time. And that sense of entitlement that's there, or where is the waiter? That's me. It's really, I noticed that coming up. Where is the waiter, or the person who should be serving us? What is it with this restaurant? Just that attitude of entitlement. And rather than, wow, I actually am lucky enough to know that a bus is going to come sooner or later. When I was in Tanzania, we waited 12 hours for a bus and we weren't even sure it was going to come because the previous one had just the bus driver just told us to get off. It was in the middle of nowhere. There was no village, there was no house. It was and we didn't speak Swahili. And there we were, We're like, oh my God, is another bus going to come? Actually, it was, it was almost 24 hours before the next bus came. So, and then this kind of gratitude is not a distorted gratitude, as I said, oh, I should be grateful. There's no should in gratitude. All right, maybe that's enough. It's 8:04 already. Okay. So, let me read. Oh, I'll read. This is like this was so sweet. I wrote this like I'm 72 now, coming on for 73. I must have written this like over 50 years ago, and it was just caught in a book. And I'll just read a couple of sentences, and I did some little drawing around it. So I must have written this when I needed to, work with my mind. I give thanks for all my blessings, for all the parts of my body that work, for the lessons I'm learning, and I give thanks for all that doesn't work. I pray for the strength to feel my fear and to be unafraid, knowing I am held in the stream of life and communion of love. I pray for justice and equity in how we organize ourselves so that each child and adult and something have enough food to eat, shelter, clothes, medical care. I pray that all life is guided by morality and understanding. I pray to forgive my mother and her inadequacies. I pray I might see my beauty and strength. I give thanks for the teachings, the Buddha, and to all my teachers. So sweet. That's so sweet. I was so young, and I was like, yes, I have to write a prayer. I have to help myself. Okay, so this is from Alison Luterman. This is a poem she wrote. He was a new old man behind the counter, skinny, brown, and eager. He greeted me like a long-lost daughter, as if we both came from the same world, someplace warmer and more gracious than this cold city. I was thirsty and alone, sick at heart, grief-soiled, and his face lit up as if I were his prodigal daughter, returning, coming back to the freezer bins in the front of the register, which were still and always filled with the same old cable car ice cream sandwiches and cheap frozen greens. Back to the knobs of beef and packages of hot dogs, these familiar shelves strung with potato chips and corn chips, stacked up beer boxes, and immortal Jim Beam. I lumbered to the case and brought my precious bottled water, and he returned my change, beaming as if I were the bright new buds on the just bursting oak and cherry trees, as if I were everything beautiful, struggling to grow. And he was blessing me as he handed me my dime over the counter and the plastic tub of red licorice whips. This man who didn't speak English beamed out love to me in the Iron Week after my mother's death, so that when I emerged from his store, my whole cockeyed life, what a beautiful failure, glowed gold like a sunset after rain. Frustrated city dogs were yelping in their yards, mad with passion, behind their chain-link fences, and in the driveway of a peeling paint house, a woman and a girl dance to contagious reggae. Praise Allah, Yahweh, the Buddha, Kuan Yin, Jesus, Mary, and even jealous old Jehovah for eyes, hands of the divine everywhere.